Good morning, all of you. Now, today, in continuation with the same chapter, same history chapter, Nazism and the rise of Hitler, uh, today we will have a look at the Nazi cult of motherhood. But for just a brief recap, now, if you remember, we started the chapter with the story of Helmut, an 11-year-old German boy, and so we started with it that he heard his parents discussing about that whether he should commit suicide alone or he should commit suicide with the entire family. And then we moved on and we saw that why his father, he was so worried, because he said that now the allies will do to us what we did to the crippled and to the Jews. And then we saw that what happened under the shadow of the Second World War, and we had a look at that. And then we had a look that people thought that the rise of Nazi Germany was because of the terms of treaty that were meted out to Germany at the end of the First World War. And then we had a little bit on the First World War, and we also had a look at the Weimar Republic, the effects of the First World War, that how the war, it made Europe, which was a continent of creditors, to a continent of debtors, and how the whole society and politics of Europe, it changed after the First World War. Then we also had a look at the years of depression, that what happened, what was the condition during those time. And we saw that the condition of Germany was the worst hit, because it was relying on the short term loans which were given by US. And when US itself, they were, their stock exchange, it crashed, and their incomes, they went down by half. So obviously they were providing the support to Germany, and so the condition of Germany, it became very poor. The Weimar Republic, which was a young, fragile, democratic idea in Germany, now that could not stand all these instabilities of that time, because the politics of the country, now it was also it was very unstable. Then the society of the country at that time, the economic condition of the country, people were filled with the fear of helplessness, and they thought that they will lose all their money, they will lose their jobs. And in that condition, we saw that Hitler, he rose to power, and that how he was a powerful orator. And when he spoke, he spoke with such a passion that moved the people. And the people, he promised the people so much. He said that he will build a strong nation, and he will undo the justice that was done by the Treaty of Versailles, and he will restore the dignity of the German people, and he will provide employment for the youth of the country, and also a secure future for the youth. And he said that he will weed out from its country all the foreign influences that were trying to destroy the country. And uh, since he was a powerful orator, and the condition of the people was so bad that they just took off the little hope that they had through his speeches and through his words. And they because there was utter hopelessness, so he appeared as a messiah, a savior, someone who has arrived to deliver people from their distress. And now that was the image that worked on the imagination of the people. And because their sense of dignity and pride, it has been totally shattered, and they were living in a time where there was acute political and economic instability or crisis. Then we had a look at as how Hitler, when he got when his party, they got elected, and when he was given the post of chancellorship, which was the highest position in the cabinet of ministers. And then by this time he has also got the conservatives to support him. And then, having got power, he set out to dismantle or totally destroy democracy from Germany. And then we studied about the fire decree, because of which the civil rights, they were suspended, and then the enabling act, which made him a dictator in Germany. Then we saw that the Nazi state, it established complete control over the economy, the media, the army, and the judiciary of the country. And special forces were created to control and order the society in ways which the Nazis, or in which Hitler wanted. And under Hitler's rule, the police forces, they acquired the power of impunity. Means they could rule with impunity without the fear of being getting punished of their actions. They could do anything as they wished, and so people, they could be rounded up, they could be imprisoned, they could be thrown in these concentration camps, they could be deported from the country. So all this the police forces can do. And then Hitler, he moved on to the economic recovery of the country, and he gave the responsibility of this work to Halmar Schachert. And under that we saw that how he aimed at full production and full employment through a state funded work creation program. And this produced the famous German super highways and the people's car that we call as a Volkswagen. And we also saw that Hitler, he acquired quick successes in foreign affairs too. And means whatever he did, he got success there. He pulled out of the League of Nations in 1933, reoccupied the Rhineland, and then integrated Austria and Germany in 1938 under the slogan "One Empire, One Leader." And so then he went on, and then he tried to take away the German speaking Sudetenland from Czechoslovakia, but in the process he gobbled up the entire country. And when Germany was doing all that, it had the unspoken support of England, because they thought that the Treaty of Versailles had been too harsh on Germany. So like for a while they kept their eyes closed as to what Germany was doing. But Hitler, he did not stop here, and though Schachert has advised him not to invest a lot in rearmament of the military, because the state, it was still running on deficit financing. Deficit financing means the money that the country was receiving was less as the money they were spending, and so there was a deficit in there. And that is why Schachert, he has advised not to invest a lot in rearmament. But Hitler, he thought that cautious people, they had no place in Germany, and so he had to go. And now Hitler, he found war as the way out of this approaching economic crisis. And so he thought that now they need resources and they had to be got anyways, and he thought that he will do it through the expansion of territory. And so in September 1939, Germany, they invaded Poland, and that was the start of the Second World War, and this started a war with England and France. And in September 1940, a tripartite pact, a three-party pact, it was signed between Germany, Italy, and Japan, and it strengthened Hitler's claim to international power. Then puppet regimes, they were set up in Nazi Germany. Means puppet regimes, they were set up in support of Nazi Germany in many parts of Europe. And by the end of 1940, Hitler was at the pinnacle or the peak of his power. And Hitler has always wanted to conquer Eastern Europe, and now he moved on to achieve his long term goal or long term aim. And he wanted food supplies for the Germans and living space for the Germans. And so obviously it can be done through the attainment of more territory. And so he attacked the Soviet Union in June 1941. And this is said to be the historic blunder by Hitler, because what happened, he was already at war with the British. And so they were already fighting with the British, because he has, why, because from the western side the Britishers were already attacking, they were already at war, and now he has exposed the eastern front also to the powerful Soviet armies. So like we can say that Germany, it was sandwiched between England on one side and Russia on the other. And at that time it was Soviet Union. And so the Soviet army, they inflicted a very humiliating defeat on Germany at Stalingrad. And then the Soviet Red Army, they hounded me just like hounds and dogs. They go after people, so they hounded out the retreating German soldiers under they reached the heart of Berlin. And after that they established Soviet Union's domination or leadership over the entire Eastern Europe for a half of century thereafter, means for 50 years after that. And we saw that during all this time, US, they did not wanted to take part in the war, any involvement in the war. And because it was unwilling to again have to bear all the economic consequences that they had to bear, bare after the First World War, but it could not stay out of war for long because Japan, they were expanding their power in the east, and they also occupied the French Indochina, and they were planning to attack the US naval bases in the Pacific. And then Japan, it extended its support to Hitler and then bombed the US Pearl Harbor. And then US, they also had to enter the Second World War, and the war ended in May 1945 with Hitler's defeat and the US dropping off the atomic bomb on Hiroshima in Japan. So this was what happened, means how it happened. And then we had a look at what was Hitler's view and why he did all that he did. So the crimes that the Nazis committed under the shadow of the Second World War, now they are linked to a system of belief and practices. And then we had a look at his worldview, that what was his worldview, that according to him, according to Hitler, there was no equality among people, but there was only a racial hierarchy. There was no equality, people were not equal according to him, but there was a hierarchy. And in his view, the blonde, blue-eyed Nordic German Aryans, they were at the top, the Jews were at the bottom of the ladder. And that is why they were regarded as the anti-race and the arch enemies of the Aryans. And then all the other people, they were placed in between depending on their external features. So if the people were good to look at, they were placed on top of the ladder, and if not, then they were placed on down at the ladder. Now his racism, it was borrowed from thinkers like Charles Darwin and Herbert Spencer. And Darwin, he was a natural scientist, and he tried to explain the creation of plants and animals through the concept of evolution and natural selection. Now what then that meant was that possibility of survival, possibility of survival will have, those who have possibility of survival, they will have more opportunities for reproduction. So those species that will survive for a longer period of time, obviously they will have more opportunities for reproduction. And Herbert Spencer, he later on added to the idea of survival of the fittest. Now according to this idea of survival of the fittest, only those species, they survived on the earth that could adapt themselves to the changing climatic conditions. And now while talking about this, we should keep in mind that Darwin, he never talked about human intervention in this natural selection. It was natural process of selection, there was no human intervention in killing the plant species or the animal species. But still his ideas, they were used by the racist thinkers and politicians to justify their rule over the conquered people. And the Nazis, they gave this argument that the strongest race, it would survive, and the weak ones would perish. And according to them, the Aryan race, it was the finest. And so since it was the finest and it was the best, so it had to retain its purity, it had to retain its purity, it had to remain pure, it had to become more stronger and more dominant and dominate the world. That was Hitler's worldview. Then there was another aspect of Hitler's ideology that was related to the geopolitical concept of Lebensraum or living space. Now he wanted that more, the Germany, they had to acquire more territories for settlement of the German people. And now what that will do, if they acquire new territories, more territories, then the land or the area of the mother country, that will also become big, it will also expand. While the new settlers, means what he wanted, that all the Germans living elsewhere in Europe, they should come and live in one place. And now if you bring them in one place, you have to supply them with land also where they had to live, and then food and everything also. So that is what why he wanted to expand the country, that would enhance the area of the mother country also, while it will also help to settle the new people, the Germans coming in from the rest of Europe on new lands, so that they can also have a intimate link with the place where they were born or the place of their origin. And then if they acquire new territories, if they have control over more countries, then obviously it will also increase their material resources as well as their power. And so he intended to extend German boundary by moving eastward, and that is because he wanted all the Germans to come together, live in one place geographically, and Poland, it became the laboratory for his experiment. And then we also had a look that as how once in power, the Nazis, they began to implement their dream, and their dream of creating an exclusive uh, racial community of pure Germans, and this they did by physically eliminating all those they thought as undesirables. And so because they wanted a society of only pure and healthy Nordic German Aryans, and because according to the Nazi idea, only they were considered desirable, and only they were considered as worthy of prospering and multiplying, and the undesirables, according to them, they had like they were not considered enough to be living. And so what that meant was that even those Germans who were seen as impure, abnormal, they had no right to exist. And so under the euthanasia program, Helmut's father, along with other Nazi officials, they have condemned many to die. And so all those Germans who were even considered mentally or physically unfit, they were also killed under the euthanasia program. And now in Nazi Germany, Jews were not the only community who were classified as undesirables. There were others also, like the Gypsies, and they were also considered as racial inferiors. And even the Russians and the Poles, they were considered subhuman, that they were not even humans, leave alone even below their race, but they were not considered even humans, they were considered subhumans. And that is why, according to the Nazis, they did not deserve any kind of humanity. And that is why when Germany, they occupied Poland and parts of Russia, so captured civilians, they were forced to work as slave laborers. And many of these people died because of hard work and starvation. And but though all these people suffered, but Jews, they were the worst sufferers in Nazi Germany. And because the Nazi hatred of the Jews, now it was a big, we could say it was because of the traditional hostility with the Christians, between the Christians and the Jews. And it is said that the Jews were those who killed Christ, and because they were usurers, means those who charged a high interest on money. And so because of that, till medieval times, Jews, they were not allowed to own property, and they had to survive through money lending or trade. And they lived in separate areas which were marked for them, which were called as ghettos. And then they were many times persecuted. They had organized violence to persecute the Jews, and they were expelled from the land. Then his hatred of the Jews was based on the pseudo scientific theory. Now what that theory was, that conversion was no solution for the Jewish problem, means the Jewish problem, conversion was no solution, that even if they converted, it was no solution. Now according to the Nazis, the only solution to the Jewish problem was their total elimination, means all the Jews be totally killed. So from 1933 to 1938, the Nazis, they terrorized. First they terrorized them, then they pauperized them, made them poor, and then segregated the Jews, made separate the Jews, and they compelled them to leave the country. And the next phase, that is from 1939 to 1945, it was aimed at concentrating them all in special areas and eventually killing them in gas chambers in Poland. Okay. And then we also had a look at that under the shadow of the Second World War, the Nazis, they proceeded to do their, or to realize their murderous racial ideal. And genocide means racial killing or racial massacre, and war, it became two sides of the same coin. So like on one side the war was going on, and in Germany all this killing, racial killing was going on. And we also saw that what was the condition of Poland, that occupied Poland. It was divided into two parts, and the people who were living there, they were forced to live in the other part of Poland. And that was called as the general government, which was the place to be considered of for all the undesirables in the German Empire. And Polish children, they were snatched away from their mothers, those who looked like Aryans. So Polish children who looked like Aryans, now they were snatched away from their parents, and they then they had to pass a race test. And if they passed the race test, then they were given to German families to be raised in German families. But if they were not, then they were deposited in orphanages. And here most of the children, they died. And Poland, or the general government, it had the largest ghettos and the gas chambers. And general government, it served as the killing fields for the Jews. And then if you remember, you also did the steps to death. That first was the exclusion, that you have no right to live among us as citizens. So the Jews were told that they had no right to live with the in Germany as citizens. And as a result of that, what happened, the people of only German or related blood, they could be called as German citizens. And marriages between Jews and Germans, they were forbidden. Extramarital relations between Jews and Germans, they became a crime. And Jews were forbidden to fly the national flag. Then so as a result of all that, the Jewish businesses, they were boycotted, they were removed from government services, and they were forced to sell their properties. Their properties were confiscated and forcefully sold. Then the second step was ghettoization. Then they said, the Nazis said that the Jews, they had no right to live with them. And what happened, all the Jews, they had to wear a yellow star, or yellow star of David. And now this identity mark, it was also stamped on their passports, all legal documents, and even on their houses. And these Germans, they were kept in special Jewish houses or in ghettos. They could not live, they were forced out of their houses, and now they had to live in ghettos or the Jewish houses. And these ghettos, they became sites of extreme poverty, because Jews, before they had to enter into a ghetto, they had to surrender all their wealth. So they had to surrender all their wealth, then they need to get enter then they got the permission to enter into a ghetto. And soon the ghettos, they were filled with hunger, starvation, and disease, because there was so much deprivation. People, they did not have money, because they had to surrender all their money and all their wealth. And then there was poor hygiene also. So people, they lived very poor lives, very pathetic lives, we can say. And then the next stage was annihilation. That was, they said that now you had no right to live with us. So first was, you have no right to live with us among us as citizens. Second was, you have no right to live among us. And third was that you have no right to live at all. So that was annihilation or killing. And so Jews from the Jewish houses, concentration camps, and ghettos from different parts of Europe, they were brought to these death factories by the goods trains. And in Poland and elsewhere in use in the east, people, they were charred in gas chambers. And mass killings, they took place with precision, within minutes. And so many people died because of that. So that was the condition of Jews there. And then we also had a look, the last thing that we had a look before your holidays was youth in Nazi Germany. And now Hitler, he was like madly enthusiastic, interested in the youth of the country. And because he felt that a strong Nazi society can only be formed by teaching children Nazi ideology. And now that required a total control on the child, both inside and outside school. And so under Nazism, all schools, they were cleansed and they were purified. And what that meant, that teachers who were Jews or who were seen as politically unreliable, they were dismissed. first the children were segregated, means Jews and Germans, they could not sit together or play together. And then later on, all the undesirable, the Jews, the physically handicapped, the gypsies, they were thrown out of the schools. And then after 1940s, they were taken to the gas chambers to be killed. Then the good German children, they had to undergo a process of Nazi schooling, and that was a long period of ideological training. School textbooks were again written, racial science was introduced so that they can justify the Nazi ideas of race. And stereotypes about Jews, they were popularized, and even that was done through teaching, through maths classes also. And children, they were taught to be loyal and submissive, hate Jews, and worship Hitler. And sports was there, but even the function of the sports was to nurture a spirit of violence and aggression among children. And why? Because Hitler believed that boxing, it could make the children iron hearted, strong, and masculine. And then after school, there were youth organizations which were made responsible for educating the German youth in the spirit of National Socialism. Means the National Socialism is the ideology and the practices which were associated with Nazism. So means the youth, they had to be taught all this. Then 10-year-olds, they had to enter young folk, and at 14, all the boys, they had to join Nazi youth organization which was called as the Hitler Youth. And here they learn to glorify war, worship war, glorify aggression and violence, and condemn democracy, and hate Jews, communists, gypsies, and all the people who were considered as undesirable. And after a period of all this rigorous, very hard ideological and physical training, they had to enter the labor service. And usually they did this at the age of 18, and then they had to serve in the armed forces and enter one of the Nazi organizations. And we ended with one of the source here, source D, and what it said was that now this was said by Robert Ley, who was the head of the German Labor Front. And he said that we start, means the Nazi ideology was such that it started with when the child was 3. Means as soon as the child, he started to think, he was able to think, he was given a little flag to wave. And then comes the school where they got the Nazi teaching, and then Hitler Youth, and then military service. And then he went on to say that, but when all this is over, then also we don't let go of anyone. Means even after the military service, even after they retired, they were not let go. And the labor front, they took hold of the people, and they kept their hold till the people, they went down to the grave, whether they liked it or not. So that was what we did before the holidays. And so that was just a recap, so that you remember the chapter before we can start anything new. Okay, so any confusion? Do you want to ask anything, or is it all clear? Yes, class 9th?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you all understood?
Clear.
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am,
Yes, beta.
ma'am from ghettos, ma'am. Ma'am from ghettos, ma'am, Jews were killed.
Beta, from ghettos, they were taken to the gas chambers. Ghettos were like very, if you search on the web, you will find that what ghettos looked like. And so they were forced to live in ghettos. They were removed from the houses, they were forced to first live in ghettos, and then ultimately they were taken to the gas chambers, and there they were killed.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.